It may not mean nothing to y'all, but understand nothing was done for me. So I don't plan on stopping at all. I want this shit forever mine, ever mine, ever mine. I'm shutting shit down in the mall and telling that girl she the one for me. And I ain't even planning to call. I want this shit forever mine, ever mine, ever mine.
Sparked by the arrest of Rosa Parks on December 1st, 1955, the Montgomery bus boycott was a 13th-month mass protest that ended with the U.S. Supreme Court ruling that segregation on public buses was unconstitutional. The Montgomery Bus Improvement Association, or MIA, coordinated the boycott, and its president, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., became a prominent civil rights leader as international attention focused on Montgomery. However, the roots of the bus boycott began years before the arrest of Rosa Parks. The Women's Political Council, or WPC, a group of black professionals founded in 1946, had already turned their attention towards the Jim Crow practices on the Montgomery City buses. In a meeting with Mayor W.A. Gale in March 1954, the council's members outlined the changes they sought for the Montgomery City bus system. No one standing over empty seats, a decree that black individuals not be made to pay in the front of the bus and enter from the rear, and a policy that would require buses to stop at the corner in every residential area of black neighborhoods as they did in white. Unfortunately, the WPC's meetings with Mayor Gale were a failure, and black individuals continued to be persecuted for demanding basic civil rights. A 15-year-old named Claudette Colvin was arrested for challenging segregation on a Montgomery bus. 7 months later, 18-year-old Mary Louise Smith was arrested for refusing to yield her seat to a white passenger. Neither arrest, however, mobilized Montgomery's black community like that of Rosa Parks later that year. After Parks' arrest, leaders of the WPC responded by calling for a one-day protest of the Montgomery City buses on December 5, 1955. Meanwhile, after securing bail for Parks with Clifford and Virginia Durr, E.D. Nixon, past leader of the Montgomery chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or NAACP, began to call on local black leaders, including Ralph Abernathy and Dr. King, to organize a planning meeting. On December 5th, black ministers and leaders met at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church and agreed to publicize the December 5th boycott. The planning protest received unexpected publicity in the weekend newspapers and in radio and television reports. Finally, on December 5th, 90% of the Montgomery black community stayed off the city buses. That afternoon, city ministers and leaders met to discuss the possibility of extending the boycott into a long-term campaign. During this meeting, the MIA was formed and Dr. King elected their president. In its first matter of business, the MIA voted to continue the boycott. On December 8th, the MIA issued a formal list of demands: courteous treatment by bus operators, first come first served seating for all, with blacks seating from the rear and whites from the front, and black bus operators on predominantly black routes. The demands were not met, and Montgomery's black residents stayed off the buses through 1956, despite efforts by city officials and white citizens to defeat the boycott. After the city began to penalize black taxi drivers for aiding the boycotters, the MIA organized a complex carpool involving over 300 cars. City officials obtained injunctions against the boycott in February 1956 and indicted over 80 boycott leaders under 1921 law prohibiting conspiracies that interfered with lawful business. King was tried and was convicted on the charge and ordered to pay a $500 fine or serve 386 days in jail in the case of the state of Alabama v. Martin Luther King Jr. Despite this resistance, the boycott continued. National coverage of the boycott and King's trial resulted in support from people outside of Montgomery. On June 5, 1956, the Federal District Court ruled in the case of Browder v. Gale that bus segregation was unconstitutional, and in November 1956, the Supreme Court affirmed Browder v. Gale and struck down laws requiring segregated seating on public buses. The court's decision came the same day that King and the MIA were in circuit court challenging an injunction against the MIA carpools. Resolved not to end the boycott until the order to desegregate the buses actually arrived in Montgomery, the MIA operated with the carpool system for another month. The Supreme Court upheld the lower court's ruling, and on December 20, 1956, King called for the end of the boycott, and the community agreed. The next morning, he boarded an integrated bus with Ralph Abernathy, Edie Nixon, and Glenn Smiley.